You are sitting in a meeting room on a Tuesday afternoon. Your manager is explaining a new policy. Starting next month, the team will be expected to respond to client messages on weekends. No additional pay. No formal opt-out. The tone is professional. The message is clear. And somewhere between the second and third sentence of the explanation, your body makes a decision before your mind does. You feel it in your chest first. A tightening. Not anger, not fear exactly. Something quieter than both. It is the calculation, the instant, automatic, completely involuntary financial calculation that your brain runs every time a situation carries a cost for refusal. If I push back, this could escalate. If this escalates, my position becomes uncertain. If my position becomes uncertain, what is in the account? How long does it last? Is that enough to absorb a transition? The answer comes back in under 3 seconds. And you hear yourself say, sure, no problem. You drive home with the specific exhaustion of a person who said yes to something they did not choose, not because they were weak, not because they lacked conviction, because the calculation ran, and the calculation had only one possible result. That calculation, that 3-second surrender, is not a personality flaw. It is not a character problem. It is what happens to a brain that is operating below a specific financial threshold, a threshold that changes permanently and measurably the quality of every decision you make, every negotiation, every risk, every morning when you open your eyes, and before you have decided anything, the number is already running. George Soros spent 50 years studying that calculation. He gave it a name. He traced its mechanism through markets and individual lives and entire economies. And he identified, with the precision of someone who had experienced it firsthand, the exact number at which it stops. That number is $10,000. Not because $10,000 makes you wealthy. It does not. Not because it changes the visible facts of your life in any dramatic way. Because $10,000 held in an account you do not touch shuts down a process in your brain that has been running without your consent for longer than you realize. And when that process stops, when the calculation finally goes quiet, the person left standing in the silence is someone you have not yet had the chance to meet. This video is about that person and about exactly what it costs to become them. Let's the countdown begin. We begin with the first mechanism. I call it the cognitive tax. Most people believe that the problem with having no savings is financial, that the cost of not having a buffer is the cost of the buffer itself, the lost interest, the absence of compounding, the missed opportunities. Soros will tell you that this is the least significant cost. The most significant cost is invisible, and it is being paid right now by you without your awareness. An economist at Harvard University named Sendhil Mullainathan conducted a study that Soros would have recognized immediately. Mullainathan measured what happens to cognitive performance when a person is under financial pressure, not crisis, not destitution, just the ordinary persistent uncertainty of not having enough cushion. The result was this: under financial stress, a person's effective cognitive capacity drops by the equivalent of 13 IQ points. 13 points is not a small number. It is the same reduction you experience when you have not slept for 24 hours. It is the same level of impairment associated with chronic alcohol dependency. It does not mean financially stressed people are less intelligent. It means their available cognitive processing power is being consumed continuously by a subroutine that never turns off. Soros called this subroutine the survival calculation in his observation across decades of watching investors and ordinary people. He noticed that the brain, when it knows the number is dangerously low, does not wait to be consciously asked about money before thinking about money. It runs a continuous automatic scan. Is the number sufficient? What if a variable changes? What is the minimum required for this month to be survivable? This scan is not requested. It cannot be turned off by willpower or discipline or a better attitude. It is a biological response to a specific financial condition, and it runs 24 hours a day, whether you are at your desk, in a conversation with someone you love, or lying in bed at midnight, staring at the ceiling for reasons you cannot quite name. The cognitive tax is what that subroutine costs you, not in dollars, in thinking, in the quality of every decision you make while it is running. Here is how you know it is running. The decisions you make today are slightly worse than the decisions you would make if the number were not a concern. Not dramatically worse, slightly more reactive, slightly more short-term oriented, slightly more likely to accept the conditions in front of you rather than negotiating the conditions you actually want. Slightly, compounded over years, is the difference between two completely different financial lives. Soros understood this in London in 1947, not yet as a theory, but as a lived experience. He had arrived from Budapest with $40 and a framework for thinking about markets that was, in his own assessment, more sophisticated than almost anything he encountered in his early years in finance. The framework was complete. The thinking was available. But in those first London years, working as a railway porter, as a waiter, as whatever employment was accessible, the framework stayed largely dormant. Not because he had abandoned it, because the survival calculation was running, because the brain that could execute the framework was partially occupied all the time with the business of staying alive financially. The buffer changed this, not dramatically, not immediately, but over the months in which the account stabilized, in which a number remained that did not need to be recalculated every few days. The bandwidth opened, the quality of his thinking expanded. The horizon stretched from weeks to months to years, and the framework he had been developing since his student days in Budapest began, finally, to produce real intellectual output. This is what you are actually buying with $10,000. Not security, not the beginning of wealth, not the retirement that financial advisors draw on whiteboards. You are buying the return of your full cognitive capacity. You are paying off a tax that has been deducted from every decision you have made since the number dropped below the line. But the cognitive tax is only the first mechanism. The second one is more personal, because it is not about what you think. It is about what you say, specifically what you say when someone is asking you to give up something you want to keep. I want to introduce you to two people. Their names are Adam and Sarah. Same city, same industry, same salary, to within a few $100s per month. Same apartment size, same commute. The only meaningful difference between them is a number in the savings account. Adam has $800. Sarah has $11,000. On a Wednesday morning, their manager calls a team meeting. A new client project requires weekend availability for the next 3 months. No additional pay. High visibility. The implication is clear. This is expected, not optional. Adam's body responds before his mind does. His heart rate increases. Cortisol, the stress hormone, moves into his system. His brain, running the sublime calculation, produces a rapid result. If I push back, this could escalate. If this escalates, I might be seen as difficult. If I am seen as difficult, my position could become uncertain. My position becoming uncertain with $800 in savings is not a situation I can absorb. He hears himself say, "Sure, sounds good." He drives home that evening with the particular exhaustion of a person who said yes to something they did not choose. Sarah's body also responds. The cortisol arrives, the calculation runs. But the calculation has different numbers in it. Sarah has $11,000 in a separate account she has not touched in 7 months. The calculation runs, and what it returns is, if this escalates, I can absorb a transition. I have months of runway. I am not in danger. Sarah does not quit. She does not cause a scene. She waits until the manager finishes speaking, and then she says calmly, "I want to understand the scope before I commit. Can we talk about what weekends would actually involve?" The manager, who has never been asked this question before, begins to explain. The explanation reveals something the team did not know. The weekend, the requirement is primarily for one phase of the project, estimated at 4 to 6 weeks, not 3 months. And the expectation is availability, not physical presence. An hour of responsiveness, not a full working day. By the end of the conversation, Sarah has a clear picture of what she is agreeing to. Adam has agreed to something he did not fully understand. Both of them are in the same situation. Only one of them knows what the situation actually is. Soros called this the refusal power. And it is the second reason why $10,000 rewires your brain permanently. The refusal power is not the ability to say no. It is the ability to pause before you answer. That pause That single moment between the question and the response does not exist when the survival calculation is running at full speed. It is purchased by the buffer, and the price of losing it is paid without your awareness in every negotiation and every professional and personal decision you make from the moment the number drops below the threshold. Soros built his entire investment philosophy around this principle. The reflexivity framework required him to hold positions, to wait in the interval between identifying a structural imbalance and the market's eventual recognition of it. Most investors, even those who agreed with his analysis, could not hold the margin pressure, the client expectations, the short-term volatility. All of it forced exits before the thesis resolved. They had no buffer. The market, which is not sentimental, used that against them. The person with a buffer negotiates. The person without one accepts. This is not a metaphor. It is the mechanical consequence of the survival calculation running at full speed inside the decision-making apparatus of a human brain. But Soros would stop us here, because there is a moment ahead. A moment that arrives exactly when you think the hard work is finished, that destroys more potential than everything that came before it. I call it the great filter, and it is the most important thing in this video. You reach $10,000. Maybe it took 8 months. Maybe it took 18. You made the sacrifices that were uncomfortable. You declined the things you wanted. You endured the low-grade social friction of living differently from the people around you, the dinners you did not attend, the upgrades you deferred, the quiet explanation you gave to no one because the decision was yours and it did not require justification. And one morning you check the account and the number is there. $10,000, present, stable, yours. For approximately 48 hours, you feel something that resembles what financial freedom actually feels like. And then the temptation begins. Not a dramatic temptation. A quiet one. A reasonable one. The car that has been unreliable for 2 years. The laptop that is a generation old and slow in ways that cost you real time every day. The trip you have been promising yourself since before you can remember. The brain, which has been in constraint mode for months or years, receives a signal that the constraint has lifted. And the first thing it does with that signal is build the most compelling possible case for spending. This case will be rational. It will reference real needs. It will point to genuine problems that the money could solve. And it will feel completely and convincingly like the intelligent response to finally having options. Soros called this the reflexive reward trap. In markets, he observed it as the pull toward crystallizing a gain. The investor who has held the winning position for months, who finally sees the price they were waiting for and immediately feels the pull to sell, to lock it in, to convert the unrealized into the realized, to make a number real by extracting it. This feels like the smart move. It is not. Soros identified it as the single most common mechanism by which disciplined, intelligent people destroy the position they spent months building, because the compounding does not happen in the crystallization. It happens in a continuation. When you spend the $10,000, even on something real, even on something genuinely needed, you have done something that carries no visible cost in the moment. The account drops, the item arrives, the need is addressed. The justification was valid. But the cognitive tax returns, the survival calculation restarts, Adam is back, Sarah disappears. The great filter is the moment between reaching the number and deciding what to do with it. And here is the thing that most people do not know. Statistics suggest that the majority of people who reach $10,000 in savings have reached it before, some of them multiple times. The filter is not getting to the number. The filter is surviving the moment you do. Here is how Soros would frame the decision you face at that moment. You are not choosing between keeping the money and spending the money. You are choosing between two different cognitive states for the next decade of your life. One of them has an immediate, tangible reward. One of them has a reward that is invisible for the first few months and then becomes the most significant financial decision you ever made. Pass the filter. The mathematics are about to change in a way almost no one has ever shown you. Let me show you a calculation. At $500 of savings, a 10% annual return produces $50. $50 is a dinner. It is absorbed into the noise of ordinary financial life before it has any effect. At $5,000, a 10% return produces $500. 500 is real but fragile. A car repair, a single unexpected bill, eliminated before it has time to compound. At $10,000, a 10% return produces $1,000. $1,000 is a month of rent in many cities. It is 2 months of car payments. It is a professional certification that permanently increases your income. For the first time, the return is not noise. It is signal. It is a number large enough to interact with the actual structure of your financial life rather than disappearing into it. Soros called this critical mass, a term from nuclear physics describing the point at which a chain reaction becomes self-sustaining. Below critical mass, you keep adding fuel and the reaction fizzles. Above it, the reaction sustains and accelerates on its own. Below $10,000, compound interest is mathematically real and experientially invisible. You know it exists. You cannot feel it working. Above it, for the first time, you can see it. And the moment you can see it working in your own account, the moment the return is not theoretical but actual, something changes in how you think about money, not through motivation, not through discipline, through direct observation of a mechanism that is now operating in your favor. And this is where Soros's reflexivity completes his reversal. Before the threshold, the lupron like this, the low number produced anxiety. The anxiety produced reactive decisions. The reactive decisions produced outcomes that kept the number low, and the low number produced more anxiety. The cognitive tax was the engine of this loop, and it ran continuously. After the threshold, the direction changes, the number grows. The growth reduces the anxiety. The reduced anxiety improves the quality of decisions. The better decisions produce better outcomes. The better outcomes grow the number further. The growing number reduces the anxiety further. The loop did not change, the direction changed. And the direction changed the moment you passed the filter and held the number still long enough for critical mass to activate. Now we talk about how to actually get there, not in theory, in the specific daily mechanics that produce $10,000 from wherever you are currently standing. Soros described his approach to every complex problem with a single principle: find the asymmetric point, the precise location in the system where a focused application of effort produces a result disproportionate to the input. In markets, this was the structural imbalance no one else had identified. In personal finance, the asymmetric point is different, but it is just as specific. I call it the visibility tax. The visibility tax is what you spend every month to appear to others and to yourself as though your financial position is more comfortable than it is. It is not dishonesty. It is the ordinary, socially conditioned behavior of someone who has absorbed the message that how you appear financially is connected to how you are valued. The restaurant everyone at work goes to, because not going requires an explanation you would rather not give. The phone that is the current model, because the previous one signals something you are not comfortable signaling. The apartment in the neighborhood that communicates the right things. The events where attendance is purchased with money you do not freely have. The delivery fees, the subscription services, the small, repeated expenditures that are individually trivial and collectively represent the margin between reaching the threshold and perpetually approaching it. None of these are bad things. All of them are appropriate at the right time. The right time is after the buffer, not before it. For a specific period, 6 months, you eliminate the visibility tax entirely, not permanently, not as a philosophy, as a surgical intervention with a defined endpoint. 6 months, everything that is not rent, food, basic transport, and the account stops. The social friction this creates is real. The discomfort is real. The feeling of being briefly invisible to a version of your social world is real. So is the account balance at the end of month 6. Alongside this, you add one income stream, not a second job, not a dramatic pivot. One skill, a single specific competency that solves a problem for which the market pays that you do not currently have. 4 hours per day, after your primary work is done, for 6 months go to acquiring this skill. Not social media, not television, not the more great distraction that feels like rest but produces nothing. 4 hours, the skill, every day. Most people following this framework reach $10,000 in 6 to 14 months. The timeline varies. The destination is consistent. The third action is the one Soros would consider most important. You automate the transfer. The day your income arrives, before any discretionary spending occurs, a fixed amount moves automatically to the separate account. Not after expenses, before. You build the budget around the transfer rather than the transfer around what remains. This single structural change, moving money before you have the opportunity to decide not to, is responsible for more savings accounts reaching $10,000 than any motivational framework ever written. 3 actions. 6 months. The threshold. Let us go back to Adam. It is a Tuesday afternoon, 6 months from now. The same manager, the same conference room, a new project with the same expectation built into the announcement. Adam checks his account that morning. The number is $11,200. He has not touched it in 3 months. It has been there stable, producing a quiet that he did not fully notice until it was present. The manager speaks, the expectation lands, the survival calculation runs, and this time the result is different. Not dramatically different, a second longer, a slightly lower heart rate. A small but real reduction in the certainty that no is not an option. He does not make a scene. He does not resign. He waits until the manager finishes, and he says, "Can we talk through the specific scope before I commit?" He drives home that evening not with the exhaustion of a surrender, but with something quieter and more durable, not triumph. Clarity. This is what Soros meant when he said that the most important financial decision of his life was not a trade, not the British pound in 1992 when he made $1 billion in a single day, not any of the strategic moves that made him one of the most successful investors in history. It was the decision made in Budapest in 1947 to treat the loop as a structure rather than a reality. Most people around him had come to accept the constraints as facts. The Soviet occupation had closed enough doors that the remaining choices all looked like different versions of the same trap. Soros made a different decision. The constraints are not facts. They are a structure. Structures have mechanisms. Mechanisms have asymmetric points. Asymmetric points can be found and used. He left with $40 and that decision still intact. The decision you face is not the same decision. The stakes are different. The geography is different. But the underlying structure is identical, a reflexive loop running in the wrong direction, sustained by a number that has not yet crossed a specific threshold. Below that threshold, the cognitive tax runs. Adam says yes in the meeting. The math produces noise. The horizon stays at 30 days. Above it, Sarah pauses before she answers. The calculation returns a different result. The math becomes signal. The horizon stretches. $10,000 is not a destination. It is not the beginning of wealth. It is not even the beginning of financial security in any comprehensive sense. It is the unlock. The moment the background process quiets and the brain that was running in survival mode is suddenly, finally, available for something else. And the something else, the strategic thinking, the longer horizon, the capacity to hold a position through the interval between being right and being proven right, that is not a product of $10,000. That was always there. The $10,000 just turned off the noise long enough for you to hear it. That is all. Thank you for watching.